The $10 trillion lie, why America's farmland is turning to dust. The soil broke first. A black wind tore across a Kansas field at noon, turning the sky to night. The farmer reached for his hat, then froze. The top layer of his land lifted like smoke and vanished. He'd spent a decade paying for machines that were now carving his future into the air. That storm wasn't 1935. It was last spring. Across the plains, fields blew, creeks ran brown, and grain elevators went quiet. To understand why land this rich is turning to dust again, we need to go beneath our feet, to the living engine we've treated like inert dirt for a century. The ground we stand on, what soil really is. Soil isn't dirt. Dirt is what you sweep off the porch. Soil is alive and it's crowded. Bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, springtails, beetles. A teaspoon can hold more organisms than there are people on Earth. For plants, this isn't trivia, it's plumbing and power. Fungi stretch hyphal threads like fiber optic cables, trading minerals for sugars. Bacteria manufacture natural antibiotics that help roots push back pathogens. This living network is what scientists and farmers mean when they say organic matter. More life means more structure, more water held in place, more resilience when weather snaps. Get this: healthy soil clumps. Those tiny aggregates are like granola, not flour. Water infiltrates instead of racing away. Roots slide deeper. When the wind hits, the surface doesn't just take flight. For decades, the conventional playbook, deep tillage, bare fields, synthetic inputs, treated soil as a medium, not a community. You grow a crop, you add fertilizer, you kill the pests. It worked until it didn't, because every pass of the plow breaks fungal networks. Every bare month burns off carbon. Every heavy rain on uncovered ground blows apart the granola into powder. Meanwhile, something else was happening behind the yield numbers. Farmers noticed their fields crusting after storms. Tractor tires left ruts where water used to soak. Irrigation had to start earlier in the season to keep seedlings alive. Yields still looked fine until a dry year. Then, the good ground separated from the fragile ground, and that fragility had a price that didn't show up on the seed invoice. To understand why, we need to go back to the last time fields blew so hard the sky went black. In the 1930s Dust Bowl, grasslands were plowed for wheat across a region that rarely sees more than 20 inches of rain. With roots gone, drought arrived, and the wind finished the job. Black blizzards rolled all the way to the East Coast. By the early 1940s, recovery came with basic changes: shelter belts, contouring, grass restored. The lesson wasn't mystical. Keep cover on the land, keep roots in the ground, keep structure intact. Here's where it gets tricky. Post-war agriculture scaled up. Bigger tractors, bigger fields, fewer fences and trees. Tillage got faster. Chemicals took pressure off rotation. The calculus made sense in a world of cheap fuel and stable rain. But the biology didn't change. The organisms that build aggregates don't care about commodity prices. Bare is bare, disturbance is disturbance. Over time, conventional systems lost organic matter. Research has documented that trend, while long-term organic and regenerative systems built it. With less organic matter, soils hold less water. In a drought, plants stress earlier. In a downpour, more soil leaves the field. Across the country, a new generation of farmers started testing a different approach. Cover crops seeded after harvest to keep living roots year-round. Reduced tillage, sometimes none. Livestock back on cropland to cycle nutrients. They weren't guessing. They were responding to what their fields were telling them. In trials and on farms, organic matter rose, water infiltration improved, and disease pressure changed. A farmer in a SARE project saw reduced nitrogen needs without yield drag when he layered covers with smarter timing. Another used biofumigant brassicas to manage soil-borne disease in nursery crops while cutting chemical exposure for workers. These aren't slogans, they're methods. But there was one problem: time. Building soil is like compounding interest. The first year feels slow, the fifth year surprises you. Meanwhile, bills are monthly. Crop insurance rewards planting on time, not waiting for a cover crop to finish. Grain buyers don't pay a premium for infiltration rates, and debt doesn't bend for rain. So many producers stayed on the treadmill: rip, plant, spray, harvest, repeat. If the weather held, the spreadsheet worked. If the weather broke, costs exploded. What nobody knew at the time, because no one had incentive to measure it, was the hidden balance sheet. When a field loses 1/10 of an inch of topsoil to wind or water, what's the value of that lost capacity? How do you price the future yield that won't happen because a fungal network was shredded? How do you value the flood that sent nitrate into a creek because there was nothing living to sip it? We don't book those losses, so they don't look real. But the farmer in Kansas feels them when he has to roll a pivot one more week, and the county feels them when culverts choke with silt. Now remember, this isn't about purity. Nobody is suggesting we go back to hand hose and horse teams. The question is whether the ground we stand on can keep doing the job we're asking of it under the current system. The science says healthy soil is more than chemistry, it's structure, biology, and time. The history says when we ignore that, wind and water take what we thought we owned. Everything is about to get more personal, because the bill for degradation doesn't arrive as a line item, it arrives as a storm, a drought, a field that suddenly stops forgiving small mistakes. And once the top layer leaves, it doesn't come back on a delivery truck. The race for yield, the incentive that broke the land. Start with a simple decision. A farmer has 2 seed options. One promises 5 extra bushels with a higher nitrogen bill and a stiffer stalk that stands for late harvest. The other is cheaper, mid-yield, better on low fertility. The banker likes the first option because crop insurance uses yield history. A higher yield this year nudges the guarantee next year. That's not just agronomy, it's collateral. The push for yield came with a promise, more grain, more security, but the promise had a clause. To chase it, fields had to be cleaned, leveled, and managed like factories. Fall tillage to bury residue, spring tillage to warm soil, fertilizer pre-plant, pesticide on schedule, harvest to the fence line. Fence rows came out. Shelter belts were cut because GPS can plant straighter when nothing breaks the line. Wind breaks don't earn in a spreadsheet, but they stop wind. When they vanish, the wind doesn't. Meanwhile, markets narrowed. Corn, soy, wheat. Rotation got shorter because the elevator paid for what it could store and ship. The agronomic rotation that broke pest cycles was replaced by a financial rotation. Plant the crop with the best forward contract. It worked until the pests adapted to the plan and the weather didn't. Here's where the incentives hardened. Subsidies weren't a villain, they were designed to stabilize farm income. But stability index to yield makes the safest bet look like the most aggressive one. If your neighbor hits 230 bushels, your 190 isn't just lower, it's riskier, because the guarantee that underwrites your loan lives in last year's average. You don't get paid for infiltration rates or organic matter percentage. You get paid for grain. So decisions stacked up on the side of outputs. Bigger headers to harvest faster, more horsepower to beat the rain, preemptive herbicides because one flush of weeds can clip 10 bushels and a dock at the elevator, insurance deadlines that reward planting into ground that should have waited 2 days to dry. Each choice makes sense in isolation. Together, they create bare weeks and brittle structure. That's the space where erosion starts. Get this, yields genuinely rose, hybrids improved, planters singulated, variable rate tech cut waste. For a while, everyone won, but while the top line climbed, the base eroded. On silt loams that once soaked 2 inches of rain, stormwater began to sheet. In the western plains, aquifers carried the stress. Irrigation masked soils lost sponge. Costs crept, more nitrogen to feed the same crop, more fungicide to cover a canopy stressed by poor airflow after compacted passes, more diesel to pull through tight ground. The race for yield was also a race against time. A micro story from Iowa, a producer rips soybean residue in fall to get a jump on spring. Snowmelt comes with a warm rain. The top 2 inches flow into the road ditch. He calls it gumbo. He also books an extra pass of starter fertilizer. The field still makes 72 bushels. On paper, a win. In the ditch, 4 inches of silt. Downstream, a creek runs brown for 3 days. Unknown to him, across the county line, a neighbor plants rye after corn. Spring is a muddle, wet then windy. He crimp rolls the rye, plants beans green. Yields come in at 68. The banker raises an eyebrow, but his field doesn't crust. He skips a post-emerge herbicide pass. He saves 1 irrigation cycle. The 4-bushel gap is a fight over a season. The system he's building is. His soil gets a little darker, a little spongier. By year 5, the 68 is 74 on the slopes that used to burn out. but the guarantee on paper trails the guy who spiked 80 in a wet year. Here's the trap. The race sets the pace of degradation. Input dealers are not villains. They fill needs farmers feel. Seed companies breed for standability and yield. Ag retailers provide services on schedules that match risk windows. Everyone in the chain solves for output. The missing metric is the future capacity of the land. And then weather shifts turn incentives into liabilities. A late May deluge on bare-tilled ground scours to subsoil. A June heat dome hits shallow-rooted corn, pivots spin non-stop. A September windstorm meets a monoculture with no windbreaks. Thousands of acres lodge. Each event is unlucky. Together, they're a map of fragility built by policy, finance, and habit. To understand how incentives break land, follow the money. Counties that maximize planted acres show higher gross sales, which support land values. High land values increase debt loads, which require high guarantees, which require high yields. High yields reward practices that are fast and scale-friendly, which favor bare periods and full-width tillage. Bare periods and full-width tillage reduce organic matter, which reduces water resilience. Reduced resilience makes weather more expensive, which increases insurance claims, which tightens deadlines, which pushes planting faster into poor conditions. The loop closes. The way out isn't a romantic reset, it's a new race with different prizes. Pay for water held, not just grain hauled. Reward multi-year rotation stability, not single-year spikes. Let insurance recognize soil health as risk reduction. The moment the scoreboard changes, decisions change. Until then, the black wind that farmer met at noon will keep finding fields where the numbers penciled, but the biology didn't. The Ogallala warning, pumping ancient water for modern harvests. The first thing you hear is the pivot, a low hum, then a hiss as nozzles wake up. In western Kansas, Nebraska's Panhandle, the Texas High Plains, that sound is summer insurance. It also comes with a clock. The water feeding those jets isn't rain saved from last month. It's ancient, locked underground long before tractors, long before townships drew section lines. Farmers call it the Ogallala. Geologists call it a fossil aquifer. Either way, it doesn't refill on human schedules. Here's where it gets specific. The aquifer sprawls beneath 8 states, a shallow ocean of sand and gravel holding freshwater that made the Great Plains farmable at industrial scale. When corn crowds July heat, a pivot buys time. When wheat heads during a dry wind, a pivot saves a crop. But every hour the pump runs, the needle drops. In some counties, meters show declines measured in feet per year. In others, the water is already gone. Wells that hit strong at 600 gallons a minute now cough at 200, then 80, then nothing. Stakes, real people. A third-generation producer in southwest Kansas watches pressure gauges like pulse monitors. If he can't keep canopy cool during a 5-day heat dome, plants spiral. Kernels abort. Insurance pays for yield loss, not for the year you lose a well. The banker knows a quarter without water sells for less than the field across the road with a strong pump. Land values split along invisible lines. Families split with them. One son keeps the home place, the other moves east chasing rain. What nobody put in the spreadsheet is how soil health and water draw are coupled. When fields are tilled bare, the top 4 inches bake and seal. The first half inch of a storm skitters away. That lost infiltration has to be replaced by pumping later. When soil organic matter drops, its water-holding capacity shrinks. A single point of organic matter can hold tens of thousands of gallons per acre. Lose 2 points, you've traded a rain event for diesel. Action on the ground looks like this. June, 3 p.m., temperatures over 100, wind at 20. A center pivot traces its arc. Beneath it, roots stay shallow because compacted layers push them sideways. Sensors show stress even with water on. A mile away, a field with 5 years of covers and no-till holds a cooler canopy by late afternoon. That producer still irrigates, but he starts at dawn, not midnight, and spins slower. He's using water the aquifer will never see again at a slower rate, because his topsoil stores more between passes. Meanwhile, something else is happening upstream and down. Municipalities tap into the same system. Town wells drop, treatment costs climb, and residents complain about water taste. River flows thin where springs once fed them. In dry years, local creeks become lines of cottonwoods with no water to reflect. When the aquifer dips below pump intakes, it's not a pause, it's a permanent haircut. You don't just drill deeper into sand with no recharge and expect a comeback. This was the moment everything changed for a county in the Texas Panhandle. The year started wet, planting was early, then came a 40-day dry stretch with record heat. Pivots ran non-stop, power bills spiked, 24 wells failed mid-season, fields were chopped for silage, the feed yard paid pennies on the dollar. The immediate impact was obvious: revenue gone. The ripples were quieter. A machinist lost winter overhaul work. A school board delayed roof repairs. A Main Street cafe closed a day a week. To understand why policy matters here, go back to incentives. Water rights were set when the aquifer felt endless. Use it or lose it, provisions nudged pumping out of fear. The paper right would vanish unused. Crop insurance guaranteed revenue on thirsty corn, but offered less certainty for sorghum or wheat that sip less. Seed genetics favored high-yield corn hybrids that shine with uniform water, not crops that roll with stress. So wells spun. The year they couldn't, everyone saw how exposed they were. Get this, farmers are adapting. Some shift acres from corn to cotton or milo. Others split pivots, watering only high-reward slices, leaving corners to prairie strips or grazing. A few form local water districts that set pumping limits everyone hates but abides, because the alternative is a ghost map of abandoned circles. They try deficit irrigation, less water at the right stage, more later. They invest in low-energy precision application, drop nozzles closer to the ground, cut wind drift. These choices buy seasons, maybe years. But there was one problem: without soil that holds moisture, even the best tech is a bandage. A thunderstorm that soaks an inch into a spongy profile is worth 2 on a sealed one. Cover roots open channels. Fungal threads stitch particles into crumbs that don't slake. Residue shades the surface, dropping soil temperature few degrees that matter. It's agronomy as water policy, quiet, slow, and compounding, the only kind that helps when the reservoir is older than the county courthouse. In the aftermath of the Panhandle's bad year, a farmer who lost 3 wells walked his father's fields. He stopped at a shelter belt planted in the 1950s, a remnant spared by GPS swathes. The wheat there held longer. Snow had drifted deeper all winter, melting slow into spring. Wind had run high above the treetops, not across bare rows. That strip wasn't nostalgia. It was a working memory from an era that knew how to keep water where it fell. The warning isn't subtle. We've been mining a savings account we didn't build. The Ogallala is finite on human timelines. The only lever we control is how hard we pull on the pump and how well the soil holds what little rain comes. The choice isn't between technology and biology. It's whether they work together fast enough to keep the pivots from going silent before the next generation steps onto the porch and listens for that hum.